was like, if we're rubbish at it, we can just stop and move and get a job and find a place to live. We didn't kind of have that pressure, so we had no idea if we would be able to do it. We just thought we'd at least have a go.
Welcome to the She Adventures New Zealand podcast, a space to find inspiration from the outdoors and life through candid conversations with women doing rad stuff outdoors across New Zealand. Here, we talk with everyday women adventuring. We unpack their stories on why they adventure, their triumphs, challenges, and discoveries about themselves. There's banter, tips and ideas, deep diving and insights as we talk about their stories of adventures around New Zealand. My hope is this podcast, the stories and the conversations, spark something within you and inspire you to get outdoors and to fill your happy tank with the things that matter, because life is better when you do. Hi, I'm Senka Radonich, creator and host of the She Adventures New Zealand podcast. And today's guest is Dee of Noodles for Breakfast. Dee is a photographer, a filmmaker, an adventurer. She's best mate to Tom and mama to 3 kids who are 14, 12 and 8. And they're now based in beautiful Wānaka in the South Island. From November 2020 to May 2021, Dee, Tom and the kids tramped the full length of the Te Araroa Trail from Cape Reinga to the Bluff. Now, it's one hell of a 6-month adventure, scratching a small part of the itch that's finding your way in this magnificent world when often it seems to be crumbling around you. Now settled back into the routine of jobs and school, with the kids keen to build a solid base of mates in their new surrounds, Dee is experimenting with micro-adventures, trying to work outdoors more and live a more adventurous life in the day-to-day. In this conversation, we talk about what had them decide to pack up everything, return home to New Zealand and do the Te Araroa Trail as a whānau. We talk about the challenges and the growth that come hard and fast when you do this trail as a family that has not done a ton of long tramps and overnight camping. And Dee's been kind enough to share a stack load of tools and resources for anyone with or without a family that's wanting to do the trail. You'll be able to access these resources in a link with this podcast. So get ready for this inspiring, candid conversation. Hit the subscribe button and enjoy. So welcome, Dee, to the She Adventures New Zealand podcast. I'm super stoked to have you here.
Oh, so tough to be here. Like, what do they say? Long time listener, first time caller.
Yes!
She Adventures has, guided me out of a few dark moments. So cool, very cool to be here.
Oh, Dee, that's so lovely to hear. When I read more information about you, because I've followed your story with you and your kids and stuff like that, and when I read the story that you shared, is more of what you shared with me, I was like, wow, she's like even more awesome for everything that she's doing. So it's nice to connect. And I know we got really close when I was in Wānaka for a trip, and
line up one day, baby.
It'll happen. Wānaka's a great spot, so I got no hesitations coming down. So
yeah, we've got a couch. It's yours.
Yes. So I'm really excited. So for those people who haven't already been following all my hype about catching up with you, I'd love for those people who this is their first time they've ever heard of who you are and what you do. Dee has lots of noodles, noodles for breakfast. How's that for a force of habit? Lots of noodles is an ad. It's a New Zealand ad.
Yeah, I was just trying to think
of
what
what's it called? Lots of noodles.
Oh, yeah. That must be only from the 90s.
Yeah, I might be showing my age. That totally fell out of my mouth without even thinking about it.
That's the first time we'll have to make like a meme out of that. Very good.
Yeah. Yeah, but what's it called? Noodles for breakfast.
My uncle was the Maggie dad. My mum's a Maggie mum, and Maggie mums are much more fun. Well, my uncle was the Maggie dad in that ad. That was like my claim to fame at primary school.
You're like,
I like this train. Yeah, very good.
So yeah, this is going to be a fun conversation. I know we're going to have a good time. So Dee's Instagram is I was going to do it again. Noodles for Brekkie, and her and her whānau travelled the full length of New Zealand doing the Te Araroa Trail, and I just think it's super inspiring. One, to see a whole family do it, because that in itself is got to be a mission and have all the levels of adventures, and be quite the journey. And also just to connect up with another amazing woman that's doing some cool stuff in the outdoor space, and that's, I think, in your own way, really inspiring some women out there to get out and do cool shit. So I'm mega stoked that you're here.
I'm so chuffed. You can see, look how red my face is. This is chuffed.
Chuffed face. So, so for anyone who's joining us for the first time and who hasn't followed you or anything, do you maybe want to give us a little bit of a backstory?
Oh man, this is opening a can of worms. Brevity is not my forte, and this time of evening, eloquence is gone, baby. So I grew up in Whangarei, kind of rural, on a dairy farm, and 2 awesome folks and 3 brothers, and heaps of really low budget outdoor adventures. So kind of cool stuff like that my kids would never do, like sleeping without a mattress in a really cheap thin sleeping bag, just with like silage cover over the top to keep the condensation off. Nice. And one night we slept up some trees on the top of the hill with probably 15 of my cousins without sleeping bags or anything, just kind of huddled together under this piece of silage wrap, trying to keep warm, and there were possums running over everybody. It was crazy. So my dad had 4 brothers, and they were all pretty adventurous, so it was cool and a little bit lonely, like out on the farm. So creativity became quite a good outlet. In high school I got into the darkroom and had a really cool art teacher and a really cool photography teacher at Whangarei Girls High School. And then I went to art school down in Dunedin, and that was unreal. Kind of you get to, I had the opportunity to reinvent myself in a different town after all of the high school versions of myself, so I love that. But the biggest probably awakening with all of that was meeting Te Waipounamu, the South Island. It was just unreal, so different to up north, and I was always drawn to the maunga around here, and had a whole lot of mates that lived in Queenstown and Wānaka, so we could come across a bit on our very low student budgets, sliding down hills on real estate signs and such. Not a lot of real snowboarding, but when we could afford it, we would hire a board. And then after uni, I went over to Sydney, and I couldn't really get a job. I went to art school and studied photography and like filmmaking and stuff, but it was more conceptual and not really designed for the industry. So I found that I couldn't really get a job in the industry. I did try for a little bit, started working in the tourism. I was a climb leader or a tour guide on the Sydney Harbour Bridge for about for a while. That's where I met my husband Tom, who is famous Mr. Noodles for Brekkie.
Mr. Noodles.
the big bearded man. So that was pretty cool, getting the opportunity to spend a lot of time outdoors. Did a season as a lifty down at the snow, a bit of kayak guiding, and then got into the advertising industry when I wanted to be creative again. Started taking photos on the side because I always loved doing that. I kind of kept up doing that, and then made that my full-time job about 8 years ago. And we had 3 kids along the way. And so we were living in Australia, and then we moved to New Zealand to do Te Araroa.
Yes. So you actually left us. Look at that. Like, I don't know how to describe here's my life. It sounds like you've had the most amazing background. I love like your story about how you grew up and where you grew up and the things you did, because there were so many things in there. I was like, yeah, I was doing that as a kid as well.
Yeah,
so.
I reckon it's such a Kiwi way of doing things, eh?
Yeah.
We should just jam on that someday.
yeah. My mum and dad have a Dad's still got the house that him and mum have, and that's a half-acre section in Blockhouse Bay, so central Auckland. But the primo thing about it is that the house is at the top, and then it's just like a whole section. So we'd take those old metal go-karts, do you remember them? And they had the little push pedal things, and so to brake you just had to put your feet on the pedals and that would stop it. But you know, when you get a lot of speed, you can't put your feet on them because they're going 200 miles an hour. So you put your feet on the outside of the pedals, also on the wheels to stop. So we used to bomb from the top of the thing all the way down, and it was going way too fast to put your feet to slow down. So you just like hoon sideways to scrub speed off, and then you'd end up in the like 2-meter deep flex bush. You had to crank the wheel sideways to get the thing up sideways to stop it, and then you'd be like, right, and then you just tow it back up and have another go.
Yeah, because you probably never had shoes on to put onto the wheels, so it's on your bare feet.
We wore shoes back in our kids' age.
We did a year in Australia when I was 9. Mum and Dad got some jobs and then took about 6 months off and bought a really old panel van and a caravan, and we travelled around. And we went to school when they were working for a couple of little stints, and you had to wear shoes to school in Australia. It was the rules, and I was always getting in trouble for taking my shoes off and then losing them. Yeah.
So New Zealand childhood.
Yes.
So you left Australia to come back to New Zealand to specifically do the TA.
Yeah, so there was, like, if you think about the why, or because that's a pretty drastic move. So
yeah,
we'd kind of toyed with the idea of moving back to New Zealand. Tom was always really keen, and I just wasn't quite ready and didn't really know how to go about it. And then Mum and Dad actually died in a car accident in the States back in 2018, I think it was. And so that was really gnarly, and that's like a whole story in itself. But
that's a lot.
Yeah. The motivation,
rethink about life when big situations like that happen. So
yeah, and I've got 3 brothers, and we all get along really well. We don't see that much of each other, and everyone had a really hard time with a bit of depression and the grief afterwards. And then my dad's mum was getting really old, and I was always really close to her, so there was a bunch of things like that motivated us to finally come home and connect with my whānau back here, and let the kids see what it's like to be half Kiwi as well. And then with COVID happening, and we couldn't get back, but we could get back if we were going to move back permanently, so that was one way through it. So we kind of threw around that idea, and then if we were going to sell all of our stuff and move countries, then that gave us a little bit of an opening. And also, like, most of my work was cancelled in COVID, and you know how strange all of that was. It just felt like it was now or never. If we didn't do something like that, the opportunity would go for sure. So it was fly into Auckland, have 2 weeks of hotel quarantine, and then stayed with my brother for a few nights and picked up some gear in Auckland, and then headed up north and started the trail. Yeah, it's pretty cool.
Oh. That's amazing. And I think it's like, it's hard because sometimes it is those really big things that make us then make big moves in our life as well. Yeah. So, and it's sometimes a bit sad that it has to be those big things that make us go, there's this thing that I've always wanted to do, so I'm going to go do it now because I've just realized how maybe precious life is, or, you know, that you just never know when your time's up and that sort of thing. So when the opportunities, those sort of opportunities come together, timed with that, and then COVID, and those are a lot of like things lining up to bring you back to New Zealand to get out and do the TA.
Yeah, it was like someone was behind us with a
yeah. Yeah, because when you talk about it, it's like this and then this, and in my mind I'm like, those just sound like perfect callings to go, hey.
Yeah, you'd be foolish not to, right?
Yeah. I'm pleased that you listened to the call.
Yeah, it's hard to hear it sometimes. Life's pretty busy, eh?
Yeah, it's so you got to cut through all of that. So talk me through a little bit about the TA, because I mean, making a commitment to come back to New Zealand, that's one thing, you know, with all of that sort of stuff, pandemic, all of that, then coming back here and then going, I'm not just going to go do a walk, and we're not going to just take, you know, 2-3 weeks off and go to a couple of huts. I'm going to walk the entire length of New Zealand through the forests with my family, with young children. So I was like, there's a whole lot of logistics and all of that. So talk me through a little bit about how you went about coming to that, like that really big decision about doing the TA, and then also, I think
the lockdowns gave us space for the dream to kind of take shape. So Tom was normally commuting to Melbourne for usually 2 or 3 days a week. And all of a sudden he was home, and all of the after school things weren't on, and a lot of my work wasn't on. And so we were tramping a lot in the mornings because we were allowed to do exercise in our local national park, which was unreal. We were so lucky. And then we realized how good it made us feel out there. and I'd read about Te Araroa. I think my mum had told me about it years earlier, and then I read. Oh gosh, how's my brain going? Bewildered, Laura Waters. Is it Laura? Yeah. She's a young woman who did Te Araroa and wrote a book about it.
Oh,
and
nice.
I was thinking, I wonder. And then I found an article on New Zealand Geo about the Rapsey family who did the trail in, must have been 2018, 2019. And Neil Silverwood took these amazing photographs of them walking through the Nelson Lakes National Park, I think it was.
Yes.
And that was the first time that we ever thought that kids might be able to do it. So it kind of got us thinking. And then it was just a matter of going through the motions of doing all the research that we could online. But we did have a bit of extra time to do that when we weren't commuting, and there was a lot of extra hours in the day. And then selling the idea to the kids, we looked at videos on YouTube, and we found Eleanor Osborne on YouTube doing her Pacific Crest Trail films. If you haven't seen any of Eleanor's films before, then check them out, because she did Te Araroa the year that we did, and we walked with her for a couple of days, and we're good mates with her now. So there was heaps of cool things to see online to kind of sell the dream. And we hadn't ever done an overnight hike before as a family, and we didn't have any of the gear, so there was heaps to do. We just thought, oh God, we've got to have a go. And I think too, because we didn't have to take 6 months off work to go and do it, and because we didn't have to rent out our house, it was like, if we're rubbish at it, we can just stop and move and get a job and find a place to live. We didn't kind of have that pressure, so we had no idea if we would be able to do it. We just thought we'd at least have a go. Yeah.
I love it. And so how did it go with convincing the kids? Did it take a lot? Or were they saw the videos and they were like, yeah, I'm in? Because how old were they?
So Goldie was
were they
5.
when you started?
Goldie was 5, Joppy was 10, and Juno was 12.
Yeah.
Goldie was the most keen for sure. Like she's just that kind of energy of kid. She's up for anything. The other two at that age, we probably wouldn't have considered it because they don't have the same kind of, I can do it.
Yeah.
She's a bit of a goer, and everyone that meets her is kind of intrigued by how keen she is to have a go at everything. And because we were doing heaps of tramping just on the daily, because we were homeschooling, so tramping became part of the homeschooling. They were really familiar with how it made them feel, and they loved being out there. So that was quite an easy sell for those two. For Juno, who was about to turn 12 when we were talking to her about it, she was in her final year of primary school in Australia. It was really difficult for her. She had really, really good mates. She'd been accepted into the music program at high school. She played rep rugby and soccer, and she just had this awesome life dialed up for her, and she really loved it. So it was a huge leap of faith for her to come around and to agree. And there was a bit of a standoff for a long time where we were really keen and she wasn't keen, and we didn't want to push it, and then we were kind of trying to figure out how we could get her over the line. And before we kind of figured that out, she came to us and said, all right, I'm in, let's do it. So we thought that was really cool.
That's a pretty big, brave decision for a 12-year-old,
She did heaps of growing up after mum and dad died. She was really close to them as well. So and she definitely regretted that decision at times. But now I would say that she doesn't anymore.
Yeah. I think until you get that little bit older and you can appreciate and look back at it, and in that young age, you don't really grasp the full capacity of what you've just done until you get to be older, and then you start telling people about it and they're like, you did what at what age?
Yeah. Oh, she never regretted the trail. She loved that. She definitely found it the most challenging out of everybody, but she was fully committed the whole time. She never wanted to bow out. We gave her the opportunity when times got tough. But moving countries, like she just would have loved it if she could go back to all of her mates. Having to start again after the trail and build new friendships was really tough for a kid that age when she was just turning 13. So
she sounds like a brave young girl.
Yeah, she's rad.
Yeah.
She'd love you.
Oh, cool. And then so talk to us about the trip itself. So you landed here, had some stuff,
Yeah, we managed to gather a little bit of gear. Production was slowed down during COVID, so it was quite hard to get your hands on gear, but we ordered a whole bunch of stuff in, and our like the tent that we had to get from the States arrived. We had to get it rerouted to to Tom's sister's place, who we were staying with the night before we went to the airport in the city, because it wasn't going to get to us in time, so it was there. So we never got to try it out until my brother's backyard in Auckland after we'd finished hotel
the first
quarantine.
night on the trail. I was like, what?
Oh, it's quite funny. Like, if you look at the photos from the first couple of nights of trail, we haven't pitched it properly. It's kind of all saggy. It took us a while to figure it out. Lucky there were no high winds in those first couple of days.
Good old Northland weather, eh? Oh.
Yeah, so we kind of scrounged around Auckland for the last bits of gear, and then my auntie and uncle in Whangarei actually hired a little minivan so that they could take us all up, the 5 of us and the 2 of them. So we had this little day trip, and they dropped us off at crikey, I need a list in front of me. But, I need to say the name. Near Te Araroa, Cape Reinga, there's this awesome little campground. And
we can always put it in the show notes afterwards. When it comes to you, we'll be halfway through. We'll be halfway through talking about something else, and you'll be like, and you'll remember the name. So we'll put it in the show notes.
They dropped us off, and they went to stay with my uncle, and my cousin and her husband and 2 kids came and camped with us that night to send us off in the morning, and that was unreal because they distracted us with a fire and a beer, and we were so nervous. And then in the morning, when we had packing up disasters and we couldn't fit everything in our bag, and we had to unpack the bags and take some stuff out, then we could put that stuff in their car, and they took the kids up to the lighthouse while we were doing that. It was an absolute schmozzle. It was so just remember feeling so stressed and like what were we doing. So
but you did it. You still went out and did it.
Yeah, I think once we started walking and we'd said goodbye to those guys, they walked with us for a couple of Ks, like, okay, all right, we're doing this. And once we got through the first night and we could pitch the tents and the setup worked and the cooker worked and everything was going okay, then, we started to settle into a bit of a rhythm for sure. Yeah.
So how long did it take you to walk the entire track then?
So we did 6 months. We started on the 21st of November and finished on the 20th of May. Started the season a lot later than what would be recommended, especially with kids. So I think ideally if you can start at the beginning of October, that gives you a much better run. You don't have to worry about getting so cold by the time you get to the South Island.
Yeah.
But we just couldn't make that work. And over that 6 months we skipped bits and pieces. So in the North Island, we skipped a lot of the road walking. We would get rides around there, and a lot of adults do that too. But road walking with kids is a pretty uninspired kind of experience. It's really like fight or flight. You have to concentrate. You can't step out because there's a truck right there, and it's stressful, and you can't zone out. You can't even chat half the time. So, and then when we got to the South Island, we got to about Hanmer Springs. Went back to Christchurch to get some cold gear, and then realised that all the rivers were really high from there to Tekapo. So there's probably at least, I don't know, 200 river crossings in that section.
Yeah,
and
it's quite heavy, isn't it?
Yeah, the rivers were all really high, and Goldie had just turned 6 and she was pretty short, so it was just too risky for us. So we skipped through to Tekapo, and then we pretty much did everything from then on, just skipped a few little bits and pieces, road stuff mostly. And we came back and did the Arthur's Pass section the following summer.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, that was awesome. We were pretty unfit compared to when we would have done it the time before, so that was interesting. And then we've got from the Rangitata to the Rakaia River to do, and then the Stag Saddle, which is the bit going into Tekapo, which is like the most unreal part of Te Araroa. So we're just trying to line up a time that we can do that with getting time off work, and absolutely we'll do those 2 sections. Yeah. But everything else. So I think when we were talking to journalists when we just finished, they kind of calculated that we'd done about 2,300 kilometres out of the 3,000. So
That's
yeah, we're pretty stoked with
sizable.
that. If you count all of the extra stuff that we make up, it'll probably take us like 8 months to do it.
Yeah. Oh, that's so cool. I just think with, especially doing it as a family, it's one of those things that will just forever be a talking point and a thing that you'll always be able to have as a family, that you did all of that. So
it was unreal. Just to be able to do anything for 6 months is absolutely amazing, to see how your body can wind down and into that and out of all of the peppering of everyday life. So yeah, no regrets whatsoever, of course. It was, and all the kids talk really fondly about it too. But if you ask them if they want to do, so I keep saying, should we go and do the Pacific Crest Trail? No takers yet.
Maybe when they're older, maybe when they're older, they'll be like, yeah, Mum, that sounds mean.
Goldie's keen, the little one. Like, but it would just be her and I, and she can't live without the others. She's like, but we can't go away from the other guys for 4 or 5 months.
I know someone who's just heading off to go and head off and to do that. So
cool. Would you ever like to do something like that?
I would love to do New Zealand first. I think that would be, because that's where my heart lies. As beautiful as there are countries out there, and I've traveled to a few of them, and they're breathtaking. But for me, there's just something about being in New Zealand and standing on our shores or in our maungas, and just I feel at home, and it just grounds me in a way that no other place ever does.
Yeah.
So,
I'm with you, actually.
Yes. Well, I'm a huge advocate for getting out into our backyard, and adventures don't have to be hiking the TA or jumping off big mountains. Like, for me, it's just getting into nature and connecting with yourself, with nature, and just, like being able to be a bit more present in a place that, I feel like Mother Nature, she's kind of got your back. So it's like, if you sort of dial into what's around you and really present, I think she supports you in a lot of ways that we probably don't really notice. So there's something about being there that in any kind of level, whether it's mountain biking, hiking, or whatever.
We're so lucky in Aotearoa that I'm trying to think of the scenarios that you can't, but in most places that people live, there is the opportunity to be able to do that for pretty inexpensively. Like, there's a lot of day trips that you can do out of Auckland City and things like that too. I know it's still not accessible for a whole bunch of people. I mean, but generally people can do it pretty cheaply, which is amazing.
Yeah, but even, I mean, there's you've got Mount Eden right in the city, One Tree Hill. There's like actually just some really amazing little mountains. My brother, he does quite a few walks around there. That's a sort of like local way to get out and get a little bit of mountain in without having to travel too far, just during the week.
True.
So there's a lot on our doorstep that I think we probably possibly take for granted, that that we think it has to be big, or it has to be long, or it has to be this massive thing. But just, if you just go do a lap around the bottom of the mountain, or you just go for a walk in the field or something like that, there's really easy ways to connect back in and just enjoy the stuff that's around us. So with the TA, like, I think you mentioned a little bit about, settling into being on the track and all of that. 6 months is a long time to be out in the wilderness, trekking and all of that sort of stuff. What were some of the things that you, within, the first few weeks that you went, like, really shifted for you, that you noticeably went, that's really different for me now, just within the first few weeks? Because you're going from busy lives, all of that, lockdown, planning, and then you're on the trails.
Yeah, I think there was so many layers of that. I really should know this answer already. I'm trying to think back. I remember there was a really wonderful sense, I felt like, when we got to Ahipara from Cape Reinga. We did that over 7 days, and that was really, really grounding. And it felt like the first day jitters had kind of gone, so you could put most of that anxiety behind you and start to really just be there in the day-to-day and focus on what you were doing. The rest just kind of peeled off in layers, I think. We were still pretty anxious about our safety and making sure that we made the right decisions for the whole entire 6 months. It's not like it never got easy, and we never got so fit that it didn't hurt. Like, we were always quite amazed that even after one rest day at the peak of our fitness, when we put our packs on for that first day back in, it was always really hard and it hurt. That didn't ever change. So there was a few surprising things like that. But it felt very good to be out there. And by day 2 or 3, you felt utterly at home, and you could easily do 10 days without missing anything. It would be amazing after 10 days to go and have a hot shower and use a real towel, you know. That kind of stuff was absolutely unreal. But you just got, it just got, all of that stuff got just very normal. And then it was fascinating to watch the kids, because if they got their hands on a real book or watched a little bit of TV or ate something that was not trail food, the sense of appreciation and enjoyment, they didn't. It's amazing. It's amazing understanding what you don't need and what little that you can get away with, and how quickly that becomes normal. And then it was amazing watching how, once we settled down into real life again afterwards, how all of those layers started to pile back on really quickly. Real life is a bit of a harassment, really, compared to the simplicity of survival and just trying to figure out where you're going to sleep and what you're going to eat.
Yeah, because I travel. I built out the back of my 4-wheel drive, and it's not quite as remote as what you did, but I traveled New Zealand for 5 months, living out the back of that, and there was something about only having what I needed in my 4-wheel drive. I turned 40, and I went, if not now, then when will I get this chance to travel New Zealand for 5 months and really get to kind of do exploring with no real agenda? And I sold 2/3 of my stuff and lived in my 4-wheel drive for 5 months and traveled around, and it was epic. It was so epic. But I really resonate with you and talking about, you know, just really appreciating the things that you have. And sure, I had a 4-wheel drive. It's a little bit more than what you guys had, but it's a lot less than having lived in houses. But yeah, just life became a lot easier in so many senses. And the biggest consideration was, where am I going to sleep tonight? Like, where should I put my 4-wheel drive, you know, tonight, or what should I make for dinner? So
it's really liberating, isn't it? Did you feel quite a strong drive to move into a house after that? Like, was that about your limit, 5 months, do you think? Because I wonder how long you could kind of do that for. Because probably from month 5, like that last month, everyone was really tired.
Yeah, it was as an extrovert, surprise. It was a real challenge just spending a lot of time with myself. And it's not that I'm uncomfortable in my own time and all that sort of stuff, but it's definitely when you're on the road, you're constantly on the move. So there's a lot of being unsettled. So I know that I actually crave a little bit, enough certainty to have that. So it was definitely challenging being in my own company a lot of the time. And I would say, come the end of the 5 months, I was ready, because I didn't really have a time limit on it. I think I had to be back in Auckland for my last trip that I was running over to Bali, that I was taking some ladies over for surfing for one of our surf trips. And I think that was my only real time frame. And so it kind of timed up nicely. I did that. And then I'd been to Christchurch in that time. And and then I came back from Bali, flew back into Christchurch, walked from a girlfriend's house and walked straight up the hill and sat up at the Port Hills and watched mountain bikers go past, hikers go past, and I was like, this is where I want to live. This is where I want to live. And then moved down to Christchurch with anything I could fit in my 4-wheel drive. I didn't even have a house to live in. I didn't even have anywhere to live. So it was great. Yeah. So I fully resonate in the sense of, it's really nice and to go through those periods of not having to have a lot around you to really appreciate life. So
it's quite cool even now watching with the kids how they're quite happy to live everything quite simply and not have a lot of stuff still. They'll try and bring stuff still back into the house, and then we'll kind of talk about it. Hey, do you really need that? Could we get it out from the library? And they do tend to comment on how much stuff their friends have and go, what do they need all that stuff for, Mum? So we've brainwashed them pretty well.
I think we could all do with some time with a lot less stuff in our lives to just, even if anything, to create more appreciation for the things that we do have. So
yeah, appreciation is good.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
I think there's a lot of things that just become normal very quickly, not necessarily because you need it or it's what the community needs, but just because people have told you that you need it, or you're trying to keep up with the Joneses.
Damn you, Joneses!
Have, right? Yeah, I know the Joneses have got a lot to live for, a lot to answer for. Sorry.
Yeah. How rude. Trying to shape our lives when we're just trying to do it ourselves.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think because, I mean, appreciation, you know, you have to have those contrasts in life. It's like if everything was always rainbows and butterflies, I don't think, you know, you would tire of that, because we're human beings and we do, as much as we want, either crave consistency or certainty, we also will want on some level the flip side of all of that as well.
So much. It's fascinating. I keep bringing it back to the kids, but I think it's a lot easier to observe them than yourself.
And let's be honest, they are a reflection of you. So when you talk about them, you are talking about yourself.
Their faults are not
just
mine.
saying.
No, we are always using the trail as an analogy. When things get tough in real life here, we talk about the lows and how it makes the highs feel so much better. And we always bring it back to an experience that we had on trail, which is nice. It's probably getting old now. I probably need to come up with some new material.
We'll need to do another trip somewhere. Then you got something else to pull on.
The lows, we absolutely like learning to appreciate the lows and what they teach you and what they have to offer and how they make the highs so much higher is just such a wonderful lesson to learn. Even though they're really hard. Yeah.
And that's the thing, is I think we do sometimes want things to be really easy, you know, like I wish things were just a bit easier. But really, you know, that's just highlighting areas for us to where we can grow and expand ourselves. So
yeah, I don't know. We just need to lower the bar a little bit? Is it just unrealistic?
It's funny because I don't know.
It's just a waste of time to strive for that kind of thing.
For the everything?
The energy out for the ease.
Yeah. I just think that you just need to be doing the things that make you happy.
Yeah.
You know,
and the happiness comes with the hardness. So the happiness doesn't mean that everything's easy and la-di-da.
Yes.
Yeah.
Can I put that in a quote somewhere, aren't I?
The la-di-da part. I think you're always going to run into trouble when you have these evening chats, because the brain starts to shut down at about 6:30 p.m.
We're getting the best of you then.
Oh, the waxing lyrical. Oh dear.
I did say you look like a DJ with your
Oh yeah. Well, we started this morning. There's a few people. There's a bit of a trend at the moment to go and do cold water immersion.
Oh yeah.
So jumped on the bandwagon with a whole lot of mates, and it's pretty cool. But like you get up at 6:30 and go for a run, so that a walk and like a shuffly thing, and then you have to go and sit in the water for at least 5 minutes and get it right up to here. And if you've got some mates sitting with you, it's really distracting. I think the water's 11 degrees at the moment, so it's not. Oh, probably it's pretty close to.
Are you just doing it in the lake there at Wānaka?
Yeah. We've been trying out the lake, and then the bit where the lake goes into the river, and then the river as well.
Yeah.
So we did that early this morning. So I reckon if you'd spoken to me at 7 o'clock this morning after my cold dip, there would have been a whole nother level of hilarity.
Dopamine would have been at its maximum. You'd be like peaking. Oh, I love it. So with the TA then, I'm just wondering if some of the listeners, whether they would like to know some of the things that you took on the TA, because I know that's like taking it a bit to a practical level. But I always know that when I'm talking to any people that are off doing stuff, they want to know what are some of the things that you took on the track with you. Maybe like some of the. Let's go with. I'd love to know. Actually, here's something great. What are some things that you would ditch? Like you were into the first whatever period of time, you're like, we just don't actually need that. That thing is completely redundant. And then what are a couple of things that you were like, we could not live without this, and this was like just perfection on the trail. Like it just made the trail heaven.
Yeah, I've actually recorded a podcast on just this with Dorinda Rapsey, who
Yes.
I have to release it underneath your moniker or something because I just can't get around to making a whole series to release.
Oh yeah, I'd love to
family
share it if you've got a great podcast. We can
maybe.
we'll work something out, and because I know that as soon as you said that, I was like, oh my God, there'll be heaps of ladies that'll want to listen to that.
Oh, it's so good because the family that we were inspired by to do Te Araroa that we saw in NZGO, the Rapsey family, Yorinda's become a good friend, and actually she came and stayed at our place on the weekend. Her and Liz, they're about to go off on another big adventure, but I'll leave, that's their story to tell.
Yeah.
They did Te Araroa really lightly. It would be really embarrassing to tell you the kilo differences between their packs and ours. But
just between you, me, and everybody that's listening, you can tell us.
I don't actually know what they are, but Tom's pack was probably about 28 kilos and mine was fully loaded. It depended how big the section was and how much food we were carrying, but I don't think I would have ever been carrying any less than 23 kind of thing. So they would have been carrying probably somewhere around 14.
Right, so they were like in the fast pack kind of mode.
Yeah, and Johnny, the little one, he didn't carry a pack. And then and Liz, who was 9, she didn't really need to carry a pack, but they gave her one to slow her down because she was so fast. But yeah, we'll try and release that sometime. It's really nice, actually. We're kind of like the family that didn't know what we were doing, having a crack, and they were really experienced, and they're so beautiful. They're really rad people. You would. Like, Yorinda's just so amazing.
Oh, I love it.
Yeah, it's a cool story having them both side by side. So anyway, I digress. We took way too much stuff and we tried to pare it back as we went, and we found that really difficult. A couple of things that we couldn't let go of was my camera gear. So I had a proper camera that I had clipped on, which is a decent camera, and one lens, and then a bunch of batteries and a charger and whatnot. If we ditched that, we would have lost probably 4 or 5 kilos. And then things like notebooks for the kids to draw and write in, and we had a hairbrush, and Juno had a teddy bear, and Goldie, if you took stuff out of her pack to lighten her pack to make it easier, she would fill it with rocks. And we had but everything else was pretty much just kind of what we needed. We had 2 tents because there was 5 of us. We didn't all fit in the 4-person tent, so that was a bit of extra weight. And then because it got really cold, like down to minuses, we had frozen shoes some mornings in the South Island, so then we were carrying closer to 4 sleeves and sleeping bags and insulated sleep mats and things like that. Because we had kids with us, then we were always carrying extra food, a couple of days extra food, because we just couldn't really take the risk of them going hungry. You know, like adults can go without food for a couple of days if they really need to, but kids just shut down. Yeah. So yeah, I even just seeing Yorinda on the weekend, and it's 2 years pretty much to the day almost that we finished the trail.
Yeah, I saw the date on that. So I thought it was a nice time for the interview.
Yeah, it's so cool. I was saying to Yorinda that we need Chris to do a shakedown of our packs. But we actually only just had like sleeping mat, sleeping bag, a sleeping liner, because you'd go without showering for a bunch of days. A bunch of days. And then we had 2 pairs of undies each, and apparently I think that might be overkill for some people, but the merino undies were really good. Macpac had really nice merino undies that don't get too smelly, and they dry out really well on the outside of your pack. We had 2 pairs of socks each. We had for the North Island a little bit less of everything because it didn't get so cold. But by the time we got to the South Island, so I'll tell you what our heaviest kit was. Like, we had thermals to wear while we were walking during the day, and then a dry set for nighttime to wear to bed. So that's 2 sets of thermals is probably not the usual. And then rain pants and rain jackets. We would always just wear our shorts with thermals underneath if we were walking in the day and we were cold, or rain pants over the top. Pretty cool. And we had like a thermal top to walk with in the day and our t-shirt, and then we'd try and just use our rain jacket. And then if it got so that we didn't sweat into our puffer jacket because we didn't want them to get wet.
Yeah, of course.
And then when we got to the hut at night, we could put on our dry set of thermals, and then we had a dry set of socks. and you just chuck your puffer jacket over the top. And then in terms of our mats, we did carry those little blow-up pillows. That was definitely
sounds like luxury item.
Very luxury.
You won't be the only person.
We loved them.
Yeah.
Okay, so this is really embarrassing, but I actually had
just between
3
me
of
and the
those.
listeners.
So, well, it's like, I think actually I stole one of the pillows from one of the kids, but since having babies, my hips are all weird, and so sleeping on a really thin sleep mat, I like to sleep on my side, and I just found that I needed to have something tucked under that arm and something tucked in between my legs, and a clothes bag with clothes in it. Just never cut it, so I had a little blow-up pillow there, and a little blow-up pillow there. Oh, I'm gonna get slated for that.
Nah. Do you know what? Until somebody walks the TA, they've got nothing. They got nothing to say. Nothing.
I still never slept very much. It's still hard to get a good sleep. So we had our clothes all in a dry sack, and then cooking gear, we had 2 pots because cooking for the 5 of us, and we were all eating a lot because we were burning heaps of energy. So we couldn't cook. We had quite a large jet boil that was awesome for boiling water really quickly for coffee in the morning. And then when we got to camp in the winter, we would just boil the jet ball straight away and make everybody a cup of soup. And after we were usually wet if it had been raining, or knackered, and that would replace a whole lot of salts and be really warming. And then on the other pot, you would start to get that water on the boil and cook up your pasta or rice, and then probably you'd use the jet boil for something else as well, because you just couldn't fit the whole dinner in one of the pots. So we did have 2 cookers. I'm sure the Rapsies didn't have 2 cookers. And then we had we didn't have a plate each. We just used a cup. So there's those collapsible cups. Yep. So we just had a big one of those, and that would be, so when you had your coffee in the morning, it would always taste like last night's dinner, no matter how well you cleaned it. Because we didn't really like to use dishwash stuff, because it's not very good for the environment. So we tried to stay light on that kind of stuff. What else do we have? We had a pretty hefty first aid kit, actually. I've got heaps of 20-year-old kids from the trail that call me mum. They call us mum and dad because we would help them out with first aid. I was like the nurse. So we adopted a lot of children on the trail. And we had a pack of cards. We didn't have heaps of stuff.
When you talk about it, it doesn't sound like a lot. Like, it really does sound like what you need.
But if you're walking for 7, I think I've got a spreadsheet that will tell me exactly what the weight is. I should have looked at all the numbers beforehand, but
we can share it afterwards.
Planning a 10-day stretch, the food for a 10-day stretch for us was like 50 kilos or something ridiculous, so it was really hard to have a light pack when you just need to carry a lot of food.
Yeah, because you're not just traveling by yourself or 2 adults. Like you say, you've got 3 young, hungry little.
Yeah, we were so scared of them going hungry because nothing would work anymore if they were hungry. Everything stopped.
Yeah, how did you organise all your food? Did you do trail drops on the trail, or did you pre-book all of that, pre-organise all of that sort of stuff?
You don't really need to, because you go through a lot of towns, and so we did order some things online, especially dehydrated food, and get it sent to places, and then we would pack it all up and then take it in. But it's not like we did box drops like you do on the American trails. You don't have to do that very much. There's a couple of spots like in Arthur's Pass. It's really handy to have one there. There's a couple of spots where it's super handy to have that.
Cool.
We're really lucky to have a bunch of whānau in the North Island to be able to help us out and deliver goods that I'd have delivered to their house. And
nice.
And then in the South Island, same. Like, we had some stuff delivered to. We had we met some awesome people in Nelson that helped us out. And then so you do need to do quite a lot of organising. Probably we would have spent on average about 8 hours a fortnight on the logistics, maybe more, both of us, Tom and I. So it's probably like 16 hours a fortnight between us. So logistics were really heavy on. And so now we get families contacting us, asking us how we did it and what we did on what days. And we've got some spreadsheets and stuff that we're quite happy to throw at people to help save them a little bit of that time, because all of the trail notes are designed for adults that can definitely do longer Ks, and you've always got to have we just found that we always needed to have a backup plan if we weren't going to make it.
Yeah.
we were very safety cautious.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love that approach though. I think that's great because it's definitely different when you're doing with three kids.
Yeah.
You don't know what's going to happen on that day in terms of, you know, how much energy they're going to have or even what the weather's going to do, you know, to have those backups are what you need. So,
yeah, absolutely. Contingencies left, right, and centre. We're never quite sure which way it's going to go.
Yeah. So when you're talking logistics, you're talking about planning your trails ahead, planning what you're going to be needing food-wise at what time when you're getting to locations.
Exactly. Yeah. So in hotel quarantine, we started the spreadsheet, which kind of mapped out how many Ks we thought we could do each day, and then there's trail notes that you look at. And there's maps that you look at, and then we found it really useful using an app where you can pay for some maps. It's called Far Out now, but it was called Gut Hook then.
Oh, yeah.
And when you pay for Te Araroa Trail on there, people actually put little comments. So as
Cool.
you go through the map, you have a look, you start looking for a place that you might be able to camp for a night, and it'll mark what the water locations are. So that's the things that we're always looking for. How far is it to this campsite, and how far is it to that campsite? So we think we'll try and get to that one. Where can we get water along the way, or how much water do we need to carry that day? And then we're always planning out our sections in between towns. So how many days of food do we need to carry before we get to a supermarket? And when we do get to the town, how do we get to the supermarket? Or is it just there, you know? So heaps of just like really nutting those kinds of things out. And when you're an adult, especially a young, fit adult, you can wing all that stuff. It really doesn't matter. You can easily just hitch a ride if you mess everything up and get into a town. But even hitching we couldn't do because there was 5 of us. And so we filled the whole car as it was, and Goldie's under the age for a car seat. So even if someone was awesome enough to give us a ride, and we did do that from time to time, you know, it was a huge risk to them to have her not in a car seat or to squash us all in, you know. So, we did. We like to make it very difficult for ourselves. Logistics weren't easy, and some of the sections of road walking are just really gnarly. So trying to get rides around those. Sometimes we would pay people to give us a ride. Sometimes we'd ring in some favors from whānau, or you do find that there are people quite happy to help you out along the way, which is unreal when you find that too.
Yeah. Oh, that's so cool. I mean, it just sounds like, you know, there's only so much planning that you can do too, I guess, ahead of time, so you can get all those sort of key information, but till you're on the trail and you're having to make a lot of adjustments. Did you find you had to make a lot of adjustments from your initial plan on the trail?
Oh, yeah, we actually planned all the way because we're trying to figure out where we were going to be at Christmas, because that was really important for the kids. It was the big carrot that we dangled for them, and they just needed to be able to visualize what that was going to look like. So we planned the first month, and we just had no idea what we were capable of. We were kind of aiming to do around 20 Ks a day because we thought that sounded like an achievable number. And then we didn't know if that was going to be doable or not. And we didn't know. What you can't tell very well from looking at the terrain and the trail notes is what the quality of the track is like. So sometimes the slowest we ever went, I think, was probably 1 kilometer an hour. And, you know, so 10 Ks will take you 10 hours at that rate. And that's really different to being able to do 4 kilometers in an hour. So that kind of stuff can be really tricky to tell sometimes, even though you do get a bit of a guide. But having little legs and if there's a lot of climbing around things or jumping over things because the trail's gone, then it's going to take you a lot longer. Yeah, or mud will really slow you down.
Yeah.
So you have to be pretty agile.
Yeah. And I guess you have to be open to having that plan change on the constant, really.
Yeah, it was cool. It was really neat to be able to talk through all of the changes daily with the kids, kind of give them what their options are. So kind of go, so we'd plan to go and camp here, and it doesn't look like we could make it, but we'll have to walk for the last 3 hours in the dark, and that's probably achievable, but we're not exactly sure if it's going to be safe to do that here. Or, you know, you'd run through all of the options and then go, what do you guys think? And then they would sort of say, we think we should do this. And, you know, if we didn't agree with it, we would talk them around and give them the reasons why. But it was neat to be able to get them involved in that process so that they could understand why things were going the way that they were.
Yeah. And how much hut staying versus camping did you do? Was it sort of quite even, or
no? Well, the general rule is that in the North Island you're camping, and in the South Island there tends to be huts everywhere. But in the North Island on the trail, there's only a couple of huts. I think the first one that you get to is Pirongia in Waikato, and then you've got some in the Tararuas, and I think that's the only hut.
It's quite a long way through to get to your first sort of hut to stay in the North Island.
Yeah. We actually did stay in one earlier than that. I just remembered in the Puketi Forest, which is near Kirikiri, near the Bay of Islands, but we were supposed to camp there. We booked the hut at the last minute. So, So, and then in the South Island, there tends to be huts for most places. I think you can tent a lot less. And some adults manage to do Te Araroa without a tent in the South Island. It's quite often the huts might only sleep 5 people, or there are even smaller ones, and they could easily be full. So quite often we would pitch our tents because the hut was full. Or we would pitch our tents because we weren't going to make it to the hut because we couldn't do the long day that the adults could. So we probably did a little bit more tenting than need to be. But also we got we just met these amazing people. Sometimes you would arrive at a hut that only slept 5 people, and there would be 4 people in there already, and they would go, "Oh no, you guys have the hut. We've never actually pitched our tent yet, so we'd love to pitch our tent tonight." You know, things like that. Or come and put your sleeping bags on the floor. We don't care.
Yeah.
So, it just kind of depended what it definitely really helped. If you had a long day the next day and you didn't have to pack up your tents and all the sleeping mats and everything in the morning, then that was a huge saving. So it was quite cool if that happened. But yeah.
Oh, it just sounds like an amazing experience. What would you say some of the highlights are for you having completed that now, looking back, because you're coming up to the 2 years having done it? What are some of the highlights that you look back and you go, that I will never forget that about the trip?
Oh, it's kind of like all of it, Senka.
Yeah.
We just really want to go back there. It was such a cool experience because we were very green trampers. Then the North Island was a really awesome training ground, and we really appreciated kind of like every little notch in our belt, getting the beach done and then getting the forest done. We were like, okay, cool, we can do this, you know. And when we got to do even just walking down the Waikato River, which is pretty you could say it's a pretty uninteresting part of the trail, but it's steeped in history, and you can almost feel the land weeping, and you walk past these sites where they had those wars, and you just you feel a great sense of the history of everything. So I think every little part of the trail has a story to tell you, and walking through some of the small towns and lower socioeconomic areas is really eye-opening and really important, that you get to see that cross-section of New Zealand and not just all of the pristine stuff. Walking through farmland and seeing some of the runoff into the rivers and pollution and things like that was really fascinating. Seeing what humans do, where they poop and where they leave rubbish behind, was really fascinating. So all of the things that we thought were a little bit gnarly taught us so much. The favorite parts the kids loved the best, I think they loved for the timber trail, which is near you kind of end up in Taumaranui. Have you ridden the timber trail?
Yeah, I rode the timber trail. We used to take ladies through the timber trail for mountain biking.
Yeah.
It was pre the lodge being built when we were riding it. So,
yeah, right.
Yeah, so the lodge literally had wasn't open when we were booking, and then I think the last one we ran, it had just opened after. So.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, we had we've never done any mountain biking before, but we'd ridden our bikes around the suburbs. We couldn't hire a bike small enough for Goldie, so we bought a bike in Hamilton, and then my auntie picked it up and brought it down to meet us at the start of the timber trail. And then the guys that we hired the bikes from have this camp. It's just down from the lodge. It's called Camp Epic. It's epic. Like these really cool safari tents and a big fire in the middle. So just to be able to stop hiking for a little bit, we'd been hiking for probably 2.5 months at that point, maybe about 2. And so to ride bikes, and the bike riding was hard, and we pushed our bikes up so many of the hills and even down some of the hills because we were a little bit freaked out about, because we weren't experienced mountain bikers. And the kids rode 40 Ks a day or something in there. But that's one of the highlights for them for sure. And then
some epic bridge crosses there.
Yeah, the Tararuas at the bottom of the North Island. That was our most challenging part of the trail for sure, and probably it feels really special because of the kind of the layers that peeled off there and where we found our edges. And then the Richmond Ranges at the top of the South Island, like getting into the Alpine for the first time, proper Alpine terrain, and that was absolutely amazing. We just were blown away by what it was like to be up there and crawling over the rintles. And then the section that goes, the next section, which is through the Nelson Lakes National Park, which I'm sure you've spent some time in, is got to be one of the most pristine parts of Aotearoa for sure. It's just absolute magic. And to see the change in the forest and the terrain over that 10 days is absolute magic. Absolute magic. Huge. Getting over Waio Pass is, everyone kind of talks about it as being the gnarliest, most risky part of Te Araroa. So getting through that as well is also a huge, like, we've done all of the hard stuff now, you know. So it was special for other reasons as well. So, but I could just wax lyrical about every little section. I think it's all pretty amazing. It's not going to be...
You're making me want to go out again. Like when you started talking about the South Island, I was like,
I went out again.
Yeah, I just went to the Hefe track on my last my trip that I just had a 2-week holiday, and I had the van, so I was living in the van for 2 weeks, and I just went to the Hefe track for the first time, and it was stunning. Like the Nico that are there, it just made my heart melt. Just that beautiful, wet, dense bush. It's the one thing about living on Christchurch that I miss the most, because I lived at Muriwai Beach for a period of time, and just being on the West Coast, that's where I could retire on the West Coast quite happily. So
I feel a really strong connection with the wildness of the West Coast as well. There's so many places to explore and check out. The lists will go on forever.
Yeah. Well, so speaking of lists, if you were going to recommend a couple of cool little sections for, let's go with like a couple of cool sections in the North and the South Island for people just to get a taste of the TA, what sections might you suggest? Something that they can go and do? I know, great questions, eh? I've done the Paikokariki section, and
that's really cool, the escarpment.
Just up because you can catch the train back. Like that's a favourite little. I think that's a fun little thing to do for the day. So catch the train back to the train stop.
Even just walking from Wellington City down to where it finishes at the name of the bay that I can't remember. I needed to have my list in front of me.
You're good.
If you can, whatever parts of the trail that are near you, I reckon just have a crack, because just suss out how many days it is and what you're capable of achieving. We found that doing a lot of the less gnarly stuff taught us all of the skills that we needed for the really big sections. And once you've done a couple of overnights that are not too far to get to, then you kind of work your way up and try 2 nights and then 3 nights and then 4, and then think about how remote that you want to get. I actually probably would recommend most of it. We'd love to go back and try out Cape Reinga to Twilight Beach again, which is just a 14K, and Twilight Beach campsite is really beautiful. And I think, I wonder if there's a loop that you can do, or if you just need to go back the way that you came. But we'd love to go and do that again, just to see how it feels not having all of the stress hanging over us. And we cried. The kids, the little ones cried the last 3 Ks of that day, so 11 Ks in, and then it came a bit of a thing that the last 3 Ks, no matter how many Ks we're doing in the day, would get really, really difficult. I think it was because we would kind of call it out, and then it was just getting close to the end, but not close enough that it was like, God. So we're really fascinated to see, and we loved that. We thought Twilight Beach campground there is really neat. And I think if you want a really big adventure, then having a crack at that beach is actually really cool if you slow it down. You should just any of it is really cool. Like the North
I love
Island,
it.
I think people always talk about the South Island being so beautiful, but the North Island really gives you a sense of who New Zealand is and who we are, and seeing all of the raw, less pristine, remote, or less beautiful things in small communities is absolute magic.
I think the North Island is a little bit not underrated. It just is such a different place to the South Island.
Very different. Absolutely.
So, I'm a North Islander from, the day I was born until I moved to the South Island, because I have been drawn to the mountains here. But there's something about when I go back up and I drive through through the middle of the North Island, there's just something that just feels like home there. So going through all the windy forest roads and just making my way through there's just, something about it that's unlike anything that you will see in the North Island, in the South Island. So
I forgot to mention the Whanganui River is definitely a highlight as well.
Yeah.
I'm not sure what logistics are like to plan that, but I'm pretty sure there's a lot of flexibility that you can do. We tented, but you can stay in huts there, which would reduce the amount of gear that you had to take. And you can probably do just like 3 nights. We did 7 nights on the river, all the way from Taumarunui to Whanganui. But you can break that down, and that is a really cool thing to do with kids, because you've got these big barrels on the canoes that you can carry all your food in, so you're not actually, and the adults can kind of do the paddling, and if the kids zone out for a little bit. And we did that, what was the time of year? It was probably February, and
nice.
It didn't matter if you tipped your canoe, you'd pick up the barrel and have a little bit of a swim, and then swim it off to the side, and you go through the rapids and tip out, and then drag your canoe back up and then go through the rapids again. And that was definitely a huge highlight for the kids. So if you've got kids and you want to do some cool stuff, that's unreal. And
that's actually on my list to do. That is one thing that I haven't done. I've done a few of the Great Walks, but that's something that is on my list, because it's different, because you're going down the river and things like that. So it's great to hear someone talk about it. I've been on it from doing the Bridge to Nowhere, but that was on a jet boat out. So we rode the Bridge to Nowhere.
I don't think many people would do more than 5 days on the river, because the last couple of days are long and hard and kind of more through farmland, so they're a little less interesting. And it's those last 2 days are a really good workout, because you tend to get quite a headwind. It was hard work, but having 7 days connecting with that river, there is magic in it, 100%. Like, you can feel the wairua in that place. It's amazing. And reading about it and understanding the kind of changes that have been made in the communities there. I remember moments. I mean, it was on a jet boat, but there was some moments of real serenity. It was like we're in the middle of the river cruising down, and on the outskirts where there were more bluffs and stuff, it was still super still, so you would see the reflections of the bluffs in the water. And we've got the roar of the engine. We've just done a really great ride with mates, and you're just sitting there and you just sort of zone out into that sound, and then you're looking off and you just I can picture it as clear as day. I remember looking across. So in my mind, to go do that in a setting that's more slow, that's why it's been on my list. So I think you would probably always get thrown in with a bunch of people. That would be really cool as well, because I don't think you're allowed to do it on your own. So
yes, I would definitely go with some girlfriends.
But even the strangers that you end up being, that could be really fascinating too. We ended up being with 5 other people, maybe. They were all Te Araroa hikers except for one, and we just had the most amazing time with those guys. Everything didn't go beautifully. It's not like everybody got along swimmingly. There was I'm not sure how many stories I should tell, but some really crazy things happened on the river. We had the wildest time.
Some interesting dynamics.
Some really cool stories. It's amazing but Tom would tell you that his favorite moment on the trail is probably when we were paddling down the river. We were probably getting into the late afternoon, a really strong headwind, and we were just absolutely knackered, and I saw something shining in the water, and I found a can of beer just floating in the water and handed it to Tommy.
You're like, I prepared this earlier for you, hun. I love you. Oh, that's great. I love it. Yeah, I love it. That's such a cool thing.
Yeah, sorry, I could talk for probably 10 hours about all of the things because 6 months is such a long period of time.
Yeah, it is. It is. And that's why it's like I feel like the more we talk, the more we unpack, the more there is to talk about it. So, yeah, maybe we might have to have another catch up and talk some more about it.
I'll jump back on trying to record these couple of Te Araroa specific ones with Yorinda to get the contrast between our approach and their approach. I think is really cool.
I love it because I think it showcases it just showcases the many ways that you can do it because there's so many ways to slice a cake, right? Yeah. So no way is the wrong way. It's just
and there's some cool families that have done it since us too that we tend to connect with most of the families that come through. So yeah, there's some other really cool characters that we could get involved as well for sure.
Yeah, I think, and it just shows, it just shows people and families. There's so many ways that you can do it, and you just got to work with what's going to work for you and your family. So yeah, it's great. So I always ask everyone who's on the podcast this one question. If there's one message that you have for women out there who want to have a little bit more fun and adventure in their lives, but they're afraid of taking the next step, what would your piece of advice be to them?
Oh, I should know this question, shouldn't I, from listening to the previous podcast? Or is it slightly different this time?
I word it differently, but the gist is the same. You know, depends if I read it verbatim or if I just sort of ad-lib.
I think I know I'm on the right path when I'm terrified. Like, I've absolutely been terrified, scared shitless, really, really frightened by some of the things that I've put myself into over the last couple of years, and doing the trail with the family was one of them. But also, like, I just kind of stepped up and did some courses first that I just felt like I shouldn't have been on these courses, like an alpine guiding course and things like that, to get the skills that I felt confident taking my kids into those areas. Nice. And making the leap to so maybe that's a way that you can, if you feel terrified about just going out and doing it and you don't know how, then save up and get on a course so someone can show you how. And then usually you'll find people on that course, or there's so many awesome communities. I know you've interviewed Michelle from Outdoorsy Mama before. I think I'm in that Facebook group. There's so many cool communities with women that are scared and that don't know how to do stuff and that want to have a go. So find someone to go and have a go with, and when you're feeling scared and excited, like equal parts, that's the zone. Like, jump on that.
yes, and yes.
If you're not scared, then it's too easy. Try something different.
I love it.
That's not anxious like me.
I love it. That's a great piece of advice, because it is about riding that line between being in your comfort zone and being out of it. And the whole, like, you know, the edge of your comfort zone, it's such a cliche quote, but it's like, you know, you find yourself more when you're in that space of feeling challenged and shitting your pants, you know.
Oh, the rewards are so huge. It's so cool. And also, like, if you've got it wrong, if you've made the wrong call and you're not supposed to be there, you'll soon figure that out and you'll find a way to bow out or soften the adventure. Like, all is not lost. That's not failure. That's like testing your boundaries, you know?
Yes. Oh, I love it. That is such great advice. It is such great advice, because we can want to go all in on these big things. And if you're in that zone and you want to go for it, then do it. But like you say, if you don't make it to the end, or you have to change tact or whatever, that's totally okay.
Yeah, totally okay. I think when we were on the trail and we had to skip some parts, it was really difficult to make that decision. And I felt like a failure for doing some of that. Tom, not so much. So it was really interesting going through the psychology of that with the kids. And also we thought, like, if we didn't finish the trail, then that's a really powerful story to tell people too, that you can just have a crack and it doesn't have to work out. So yeah, have a crack.
Have a crack. Quote unquote. Yeah, but what's it called? Lots of noodles. See, we're here. We're not here for perfection, ladies. We are here for progress.
Imperfection is queen. That would be my second message. Stop trying to be so perfect, and it will make it easier on the rest of us, you know, to be our imperfect selves.
Yeah. Oh, Dee, it's been like far more than I ever expected chatting with you. It's been an absolute pleasure. I think it's really kind of you to give your time to share your knowledge, but also just share your stories and just in all your flavors and in all your realness. So because it is like, the last thing you just mentioned there about being imperfect is like nobody is perfect. There is no right or wrong way to do life, go on trails, go hiking and all that sort of stuff, that it's like we do it in the way that works for us. So, and that's what you guys did on the TA, and you've carved a path to show other families out there that they can do it as well. So yeah, and you just got a cool way of looking at the world. So thank you so much for spending some time with me, and hopefully all you ladies out there listening to this have taken away as many notes as I have in chatting with Dee.
Kia ora, Senka. Thank you very much. Feel free to reach out on Instagram to ladies wahine that are listening if you've got questions about Te Araroa specifically, or if you want to connect when you're coming through Wānaka. I'm pretty open for that kind of thing. So
perfect. What's the best handle for them to get a hold of you? Because I know you've got one for the TA, and you also have one for your photography as well.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, at Noodles for Brekky. Noodles and then FOR and Brekky, BREKKY is the easiest one. And then my photography, my personal one, which I don't post a lot to, is at DGirl, which is my name. So DGERL being the last 4 letters of my surname. And then if all of that is way too hard, then if you just Google Noodles for Breakfast, our website will come up and there's links on there.
Perfect. We'll also put some links to everything with this interview as well, so that everyone can reach out to you in a way that they can. So
cool. Cheers,
that's great. Hey, no worries. We will chat again soon. Take it easy. Thanks for listening to the She Adventures New Zealand podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, I'd be super stoked if you'd help me get this message out and connected to as many listeners as possible by sharing it on your socials and tagging She Adventures NZ. And of course, to make sure you know when the next exciting episode arrives, be sure to subscribe and you'll be notified as soon as it drops. Till then, remember, get outdoors, fill your happy tank, and do the things that matter, because life is better when you do.